Hello everyone, welcome to Times Trial. This is Advocate Preeti Acharji, and today in the morning I have uploaded the first part of Module 2. That
Now we'll discuss the second part of Module 2. In this part, we will be discussing first the power of exclusion and power to modify statute. So this question will probably asked in 10 marks, or the specific like power of inclusion will be specifically asked for 5 marks as your short note. So for your 10 marks answer, you can see the synopsis first. So this is the synopsis that we'll be following. Introduction, meaning of power of exclusion, their advantages, disadvantages, meaning of power of inclusion, their advantages, disadvantages, power to modify statutes, their advantages and disadvantages. Finally, their difference. Further, we'll end with a conclusion. Now let's start with the introduction. So this power of inclusion, exclusion, and the power to modify statutes are significantly some of the aspect of legislative and executive authority that helps to shape the application and interpretation of law. Now, this power are enable flexible within the law while ensuring that legislative intent and the constitutional principle are preserved. So this concept, it formed the bedrock of how laws are interpreted, applied, and sometimes altered by the delegated legislation. Now here we'll explore that what this power means, how they are used in legislative practice, and how the judicial stands on these powers and the relevant case law with examples. Now, to understanding the power, let's start with the definition of each of the powers. So, the power of inclusion at first. So this means that when the government can add something or someone into a law, then that is called as power of inclusion. As the name suggests, this suggests that the government has a right here to include some important laws or some important perspective of someone to the law, then that can be considered under the power of inclusion. So, for example, you can say that if a law applies to factory workers, so the government might later decide to include office workers too in the provisions. So, this is considered as power of influence. So, this basically helps and ensure that law address emerging issues and societal changes by expanding their scope. So here, as you include something, it expands the scope of the law. So this power specifically helps you to expand the scope of the law, statute, or regulation that has been formed by the legislature. It can be used to include groups or issues that were be contemplated when the laws was first enacted. So as we know that when the law first get enacted, there also a review, like after or sometime the legislature or the government will review on what or whatever they have imposed, whether it has the same impact, whether it is fulfilling the need that was required to be dealt with the matter, and if there is something else or some important points that are needed to be added, then at that time under this power of inclusion that can be done. Now, for example, as we have seen the factory worker, the second example I can state about, suppose there are, you want to make expansion in the labor laws to include gig worker, a category which was not initially covered under the traditional labor law legislation. So, over time, as the gig economy grows, laws were amended to include protection for these workers. Now, there is a case law that is KK Verma versus Union of India, where the court upheld that the power of inclusion exercised by the legislature is bringing new categories of person under the scope of the Income Tax Act, and the court stated that the legislature has the authority to include additional taxable person as long as the inclusion is within the bound of reasonable classification. Means if, as long as your inclusion is within your reasonable boundary or reasonable classification, then that kind of inclusion will be considered as constitutional. Now we can see the advantages and disadvantages. The first advantages is comprehensive coverage, because as you can include, so you can include the new issues and emerging sector as well. It also has the advantage of being have adaptability. As a facility is the integration of evolving societal, technological, or economical changes are also covered. Now the progressiveness, it also encourages the inclusion of marginalized group, new industries that need regulatory attention. Now we can see the disadvantages, that is complexity, because inclusion of too many provision can make law overly complicated and difficult to navigate. Then there is unintended consequences, which means that new inclusion could lead to legal complexity or conflicts with the existing laws as well. Now there is overreach. That is, exercise inclusion may lead to bureaucratic overreach, burdening businesses and individuals with additional compliance requirement as well. So these are some of the advantages and disadvantages. We'll quickly see power of exclusion. So here, the government has the authority, the legislature, in a sense, has the authority to remove someone or something from the law. So, as the name suggests, exclusion. So this means the government has the right to exclude something which is not necessary, or exclude someone from the law which is not necessary as per the current date. So, for example, a law may apply to businesses, but the legislature might exclude small businesses from it. So this power helps them to do so. Now we'll also see explain legislation. Now we'll see explanation. So this power allows for flexibility in legislation by excluding specific groups, circumstances, or individuals from the full scope of a statute. It also enables lawmakers or regulators to fine tune the application of the law according to the needs of the society, avoiding blanket regulation that may be impractical or unjust in certain of cases. Now, the example is a classic example of exclusion is found in the tax law, where certain categories of income or certain group, that is charitable organization or non-profit entities, may be excluded from paying tax. Now, the case law that you can write was State of West Bengal versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court considered the validity of an exclusion under the Constitution. So, this case was concerned with the exclusion of certain taxes from being levied on specific group, and the court upheld the exclusionary power as long as it was in line with the constitutional principle and necessary for legislative goals. So, each of this power has to be within the ambit of the constitutional principle, and it is necessary for the legislative goal has to be proof. Now the advantages and disadvantages. Advantages for exclusion: flexibility. Advantages are ambiguity, discrimination, and legal challenges to modify a statutes. So this power to modify statutory laws. So sometimes the government can make small changes to a law so that it fits better in a particular state, union territory, or situation. So here you're not excluding or including something. You're just making a specific changes in the law. Suppose there's a point that needs to be more modified. Under this power to modifying statutory laws, this can be done by the legislature. So here we can see an explanation that a modifying a statute will involve making minor adjustment or significant changes to the law to reflect current realities, correct errors, or close loophole. It also ensures that laws remain relevant, enforceable, and just. And while this power is generally vested in the legislature, executive body may also have the authority to make modifications in specific situations. Now, the example can be a common example for it is the amendment of the Indian Penal Code, where provision related to various offences are periodically updated to address the emerging social issues such as cybercrime or gender-based violence. So there is case law, that is NG Dastani versus Shantabai, where the Supreme Court considered the issue of modifying statute. The court upheld the legislature authority to modify the provision of existing laws as long as the modification did not violate constitutional principle or infringe upon fundamental rights. And disadvantages: modernization, correcting inequitables, flexibility are all the advantages for this. The disadvantages will be instability, abuse of power, because if you're not checked, it can lead to overreaching or arbitrary modification. Then lack of transparency, because this modification may be done behind closed doors, lacking public debate or scrutiny, which could undermine trust in the legal system. Star difference between each of the powers. So you can make this table where you can make three section, like what does the power of exclusion refer, that authority are allowed to exclude certain individual groups or things from a legal or statutory framework. In the inclusion, you can write the authority has the right to include or additional individuals, groups, or things. In the modification of statute, you can write that authority has the right to alter or amend a statute or legal provision as per the need of the current society. Then the second point will be it used to restrict rights, privileges, or benefit to a specific group or category. Whereas power of inclusion is used to expand right, privileges, or benefit. And under power to modify, it used to adjust or change the existing legal provision for clarity and consistency. Now, the third point would be a law excluding certain professions from eligibility for benefit, whereas in power of inclusion, a law that includes new sector in scope of an existing statute. In power to modify, a law that amends the tax code to address emerging economic condition. Now the fourth is in power of exclusion, it narrower, often used to limit or restrict specific areas or individuals, whereas in power of inclusion, it is a broader concept used to expand the reach or a law or a statute to include more participant, whereas in power to modify, it can be broad or specific depending on the legal context. Now, the fifth is under power of exclusion is legal effect restrict certain actions, benefit, or right to certain parts. Whereas in power of inclusion, it is extend or adds legal rights or action to additional parties. Whereas in power to modify, it modifies the legal text, altering the application or interpretation of statute. Now, the sixth is under power of inclusion, it is impact on existing statute, limits the application or reach or abilities within a specific framework. In power of inclusion, it is typically involves additional. Finally, you can end it up with a conclusion where you can give a proper statement on the power of inclusion, exclusion, and modification about its essential tool for maintaining flexibility, relevance of laws, and how it enables the legislative body, executive authorities, and the judiciary to adjust law in response to the changing social, economic, and political conditions. This further must be exercised within the constitutional limit, as we have seen further, to avoid arbitrary decision and ensure the justice is served.
So if you like this video, then please like, share, and subscribe Timeless Trial so that you don't miss any latest update from our channel. And we'll keep posting the notes on the other subject also, like administrative law, company law, as possible. Thank you.